Chiro here for Umbra Games with a review of Record of Lodoss Wars, Deedlit and Wonder Labyrinth, published by Playism and developed by Team Ladybug. It's available digitally on most platforms. Physical releases on Switch, PS4, and PS5 were made available in April of 2022, and I played on Game Pass on an Xbox Series X for the review. I literally didn't know a thing about Record of Lodoss War when I saw this game announced, and I still didn't look anything up before I played. In fact, at first I kind of dismissed this game, confusing it for the Record of Agrest War, a series of games out in the Xbox 360 era that marketed themselves on lewdness, and I kind of just ignored them. Turns out, Lodoss is a series of Japanese fantasy novels that got started based on some content made for a tabletop RPG. It contains a lot of conventional RPG systems, pulling from things like Dungeons & Dragons. There's also manga and an anime. From the game snapshots and reveals, though, I can see this was a pretty beautiful pixel art Metroidvania style game, whose combat looked pretty fast paced. Now, I'm gonna make a statement that unfortunately I feel like I need to define first. Metroidvania, as sometimes there seems to be some confusion, obviously has the word Metroid in it, and the Vania, which comes from Castlevania. If you know me, I've always struggled with this term for the genre, as you may have heard me rant about it before, so I'll try and keep it short. The Metroidvania genre seems to only apply to two-dimensional games, and the gameplay loop is driven by finding a new piece of item or gear or ability to access new areas that you couldn't before in an open map. Castlevania kinda did it with 2 on NES, but really didn't start being this way full-on until Symphony of the Night's release, and then that continued in 6 handheld games across GBA and DS after that, while the console games that released kinda went a different path. But yeah, you'll hear me call this genre an item procedural because that mechanic itself can extend beyond side-scrolling and beyond the 2D plane, and I just find the word Metroidvania awkward, because there were other games that were doing this before that also. Anyway, I say all that to say this game has a handful of things that highly remind me of Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Its stylistic choices, like the way the map looks, the teleport locations, the save points, Deedlit's cape, and the way she has images behind her when she moves, and also has a quick backslide while still facing forward. And all these things are good things. Where Deedlit really starts to branch from Symphony is with its combat. Deedlit can acquire new weapons dropped from enemies, find them in rooms of a labyrinth, or buy them from the shop. You can only equip one melee weapon at a time. You only have one attack button, but can jump and attack and aim it in a variety of directions. Deedlit also gets the help of 2 spirits based in wind and fire. You can switch between these with the left bumper, and enemies will have relative resistances to one or the other. If you attack while fire is active, you'll see some blue cubes drop when you kill an enemy, and Deedlit will absorb them, and while it's wind, you'll see red cubes. These cubes level up their opposite element that you're using to a max of 3, increasing your attack power with the one you're not using. While the gauge is full at level 3 on the element you're using, you'll restore any missing HP. This introduces a fun level of give and take and switching elements when you're in trouble. Attacks and environmental hazards of the same element you have equipped won't only not hurt you, but you'll absorb it as MP. MP is used for a variety of things, including firing Deedlit's bow, which you can find new ones with unique powers, like you can the melee weapons, and there are also some spells you'll come across. MP will regenerate slowly on its own as well. There are a handful of consumable items that, really, excluding one instance, seems like the only place you could get them from shops. There are HP and MP potions and things like a decoy. I personally didn't really use anything except for a few health potions and one particularly long multi-phase boss fight. Enemies drop money pretty often, and it would accumulate at a pretty good pace. I kind of waited out the weapon purchases just to see what I'd find in the labyrinth, and yeah, usually by the time I had the cash for a new weapon, something I'd found had already exceeded its power. I did have to change the default control mapping because it felt really weird to me, and thankfully you can pretty much alter each action however you want through the options menu. Now, as I said, the game is completely open world with your item required barriers, but it's technically laid out in stages. But that stage just merely starts when you make a specific new room transition, usually after a boss fight or a cutscene event, and you'll change biomes. All of the labyrinth is open to you at almost all times, letting you go back with newly obtained powers and items to get where you couldn't go before per the genre. I will say Deedlit's design does take a few shortcuts here, in that there are doors with just colored locks that will show up as colored lines on the map, about 5 or 6 different colors as I remember it, where getting access to those new places is as simple as finding and stepping on a switch that color instead of finding a new item or ability to do so. But if you boil it down mechanically, I mean, it's really no different than obtaining a key or special missile to open a door. The teleports look like a canopy of trees and enable you to travel to any other one you've discovered. They're set up pretty well around the map, so going back usually isn't too much of a chore, but you'll find some places that you'll be traversing more than a handful of times, as that path will have different requirements needed gained during game progression. There are the old hidden cracked walls to find around the map, usually leading to a spell or HP or MP maximum pickup. The map does keep track of your progress numerically, and I have to say it was pretty easy to find very nearly all 100% of the rooms. There was one room that, well, I'm gonna spoil it. You have to jump literally 50 times on a floor to get it to open. I'm not sure if that's some kind of inside joke or something, but it is the single room I had to look up in order to finish the map. The enemy variety, especially considering I 100%ed that map in about 5 hours, is pretty diverse. Granted, you can handle a lot of the enemies the same way, as in their AI routines are fairly limited, and a lot, if you can just walk into a room, know where they are, and get the jump on them, will usually not even provide a threat. There were a few rooms and enemy combinations that definitely can provide that threat though. Boss fights here pretty well done too. Most were dragons or people, but they had unique patterns to learn, and with element flipping could really keep you on your toes. And it also made it feel really skill based because of the HP recovery by element, and it just added a neat layer there. Graphically, as you can see, the game has pretty great pixel art assets going for it. Deedlit's animations are smooth, the environments vary pretty well across the 6 different sections of the Labyrinth too. As mentioned story-wise, I'm probably missing out on some stuff by not knowing existing lore, nor things like character recognition, but there's enough dialogue and setup to at least piece together what's going on to get you through the game. I'll be honest, sound and music were fine, obviously fit the setting well enough, but I didn't notice it standing out for better or worse. Overall, Deedlit and Wonder Labyrinth has a fun and unique combat system, some nice aesthetic touches with its environments and character animation. The design is well done for those that want 100% completion of the map, nothing too crazy, due in part to a pretty well distributed fast travel system. On the flip side, being able to beat it 100% in 5 hours definitely makes it feel a bit short, but again, games that leave you wanting more, is that really a negative? There's great enemy variety and design, fun boss encounters, but again, yeah, that story that just probably feels way more enriched by those familiar with the franchise, but enough pieces for those of us that aren't to follow along. Rated as a 2D item procedural, Metroidvania, Deedlit and Wonder Labyrinth receives a 76 out of 100 on my true 0 to 100 scale, where 50 is an average game. This is Jiro for Umbra Games. Thanks for watching.